My guest today is my good friend Martin Kearns, that I love very much and revere his opinion. Martin, welcome to the show, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. I love you too, Chris. It's been a bromance for a decade now, is it?
Yes, more, mate, more
Yeah.
like get more. Now, dude, we started this yesterday, and we were talking about some subjects that are on my mind, and I'd love to pick your brains. I know that we're going to be talking about OKRs, which is the thing that we're going to get to. But what's on my mind here is I was interviewing with a CEO recently, not for Thunder Labs or for any work, but just more what's on his mind. And he was saying to me that consequential governance was absolutely top of his mind. I believe it's bigger in the UK. That's what he was saying to me, and it relates to OKRs because that was the topic that we actually connected about, funnily enough. But it came to consequential governance for him, and it was how that he creates alignment across his practices, across his not practice but lines of business, and when they leave the room, they do what's strategically good for the business, not just their division. And
Sure.
this theme of how leaders get this without being totalitarian or whatever extreme they have to be is a theme that keeps on occurring. Like, so do you have a thought on like advice that I could give that particular CEO or leaders suffering from something similar?
Yeah, sure. With my agile hat on, one of the core aspects of consequential governance is knowing when to release a faster drawdown of funds. So if you're working on a program and you're in a discovery phase, you work to two things. One is a limited amount of funding, and it also has a ceiling to it. So if discovery has reached a point which has got something to work with, like an MVP to aim for, or a greater level of confidence that this is an investment worth investing in, well then you would release funding to the next stage, and you probably would scale to a daily spend of 80,000, whereas before it was 15,000. So for me, the evolution in software delivery should come with an increased spend rate. And the one thing that I remember when I was really struggling with some of this is I was in the red because I wasn't spending my daily allocation on the first week. And I said I wasn't planning to spend that type of number, like 20, 24, 30 people per day, until we reached particular milestones. So for me, one of the easiest things to kind of create consequence around is the number of people. And and this doesn't, and if you've got fixed teams, you can still kind of allocate people or allocate teams from one product to another. So you can shift capacity against product. I mean, that's if you're truly agile, that your platforms support multiple products, that you can have resilience in where teams focus on what product. But in the end of that, for me, if I was thinking about what are some of the easiest consequences to work with, the first one is the average daily spend, or the capping of daily spend, and not increasing that until certain milestones have been achieved. The other one for me is knowing when. So I always talk about when I teach OKRs, I came up with this concept. It's just copied some of the I'd say it's an interpretation of some of the 7S's type of thing. I came up with a thing called the 5Ps, and each one of those has a consequence. So the first one is pivot, which is we're not going to spend any more money on this, we're going to spend it elsewhere. push on, which is similar to persevere in lean startup, that we're just going to keep going with it. Pinpoint is we're not going to keep working on what we are. We're going to actually spend our money now to try and do root cause analysis, solve the problem. Pause, which is maybe now is not the right time. We can leave it to later. And prioritize. We're going to do this over everything else. And in the five P's, you're only able to have one priority. Oh, sorry.
No, I've got it. Are you good?
My earphones just, I think.
No. That's me, not you. That's me, not you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No, you're all good. It was me, not you.
No, you're back. You're back.
Yes.
I lost you for a sec.
That's okay. I just said the most important thing of the whole podcast there as well, Martin. What a shame. No, what I was saying is this. So if I'm understanding this right, as a CEO of an organization, a multifaceted organization can achieve consequential governance of his executives, COO, CFO, etc., by using a method that says something along the lines of, well, your continued funding is dependent on you meeting these milestones. So it's not just about software delivery.
It's not about meeting the milestones. It's about, I can miss a milestone, but you have confidence for me to continue. So a milestone is just a form of assessment. Like, it's a target. I mean, if you've achieved, so the problem about meeting a milestone is it creates extreme levels of conservatism and passiveness, where you just commit to the bare minimum to keep going. I mean, I'm more than happy to have an aspirational milestone, and we mightn't achieve it, but you still have confidence to keep going. It's how the CEO generates the level of confidence that this investment is worth continuing. You know, a bank won't release funding for any other part of the house until the foundations are done. The foundations have to be approved by council before you can continue. So there's consequential governance in a mortgage, especially in a build. So you have to think about what are the levers that you have, and if OKRs are aligned to just focusing on the strategic initiatives of an organization rather than everything the organization does, well, it's how much are we focusing our spending on the business than in the business. How much of our emphasis are we placing to strategic growth or new markets compared to BAU and customer sentiment. In the end, any organization has levers that they should be working to, and consequential governance means that you'll shift those levers based on results. So I think it's really important that you don't try to turn this into like you must achieve X or the numbers must be. We worked in a consultancy that focused on utilization, and they'd say we want to grow our business by 10%. That meant we need to have X amount of people working. And I remember in one organization I worked with, they said to achieve our numbers, utilization is no longer going to be 90%, but it's going to be like 92.5%. And that's magically going to achieve the growth rate that we wanted. But that didn't, no customer was excited by that. No customer was interested. And you changed an internal target and metric, but nothing else changed. And that didn't generate interest at the customer level. It was just it was seen as this is something that I can manipulate and manage myself. I change a number, in a spreadsheet, gave me an answer. There we go, sorted. That's not what consequential governance is. Consequential governance is actually thinking about the results, looking at the levers that you can steer your business by, and determining which one should move. And one of the things that every organization has the ability to do is to know what our people are working on, and should that be something else? The easiest consequences you can achieve. if you're using quite a large number of contractors or consultancies or fixed term contracts, you can have ceiling spends. You can have a strategic partnership which is works to milestones of 6 months, and the next one isn't renewed until the X is achieved. And there's lots of ways that you can do that, but in the end, if a CEO can't engineer a consequence, nobody can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Thank you. I mean, the 5 Ps, by the way: pivot, push on, pinpoint, pause, prioritize. I get those. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, at a high level, obviously, I'm not going deeply on them, but they make sense.
Yeah, we're not.
And I'm
use
not
them
trying
to manage
to
a portfolio of work.
Just say that again. Sorry.
So I use those to manage a portfolio of work. Like it could be an enterprise portfolio, it could be a domain portfolio, but you're applying them against a portfolio of work, not just a single project.
I think, I'm not trying to jump at shadows here and imagine something. I feel like there's a layer below what I'm hearing. Like what I'm hearing from you feels right.
Sure.
And when I say jumping at shadows, I'm not trying to put words in the mouth of executives that I deal with. And an executive, by the way, is CFO, CEO. That's
Sure.
sort of where I operate. What I'm hearing from you is that there are levers that the executive can pull, and one of those best levers is around milestones, and which again, you can miss them as long as you've got confidence it's going to be reached in an appropriate time. But in our first podcast, we talked about reciprocity. We talked about team building. Like, what's the layer below this that I can't see that is the real answer? Because you can have a framework and you can pull levers.
Sure.
What's the silver bullet?
Well, I think the missing link is every person, every organization, every leader always is working within some level of constraint. The CEO may be constrained to a board, an annual budget, and a strategy. Project manager may be constrained by the conservatism of middle management, the politics of trying to get ahead. A team member could be constrained by the loudest voice in the room. And in the end, we all work within some forms of constraint. Knowing those constraints and knowing which ones can shift easy, such as the shifting of funds, is completely different than the shifting of culture. But so you got to look at your constraints, which ones are holding you back, and then question, is it worth the energy to shift it? I mean, one of the things I hear a lot about these days that don't do transformation. Transformation's a bad word. I'm not sold on that, because if transformation is a word that creates an acceptance across a business for a large scale investment in a new way of working, I don't see why that's a bad word. I mean, it's not as if you just do one transformation and everything finishes for the rest of your life. I mean, organizations are continuously evolving, and we might be talking about digital transformations today, resilience tomorrow, and diversification the one after that. Like, in the end, we'll always have some kind of meta trend or macro force that's asking us to do something different than we've ever done before. As we try to do that, we have to try and figure out how can we execute that against a set of constraints. And when it's holding it back, we have to ask, are those constraints, what are holding us back? Some of the constraints of a business are habits and legacy. And I took out an old book that I it's called The Power of Surge, and in it, it really puts a lot of emphasis on the habits of your business don't help you to thrive in a digital world because they weren't developed through those tools. So as you're introducing greater levels of digital tooling, certain things should shift with it. And and I think that's an important aspect of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Well, I think to answer, I know it's a long-winded answer to you, but
Not at all. No, I was just tapping some notes.
You really have to start thinking about what are the constraints that you believe are having this impact on your business, positive or negative, and how hard is it to turn one of those into a lever, and how easy is it to shift it in order to change, focus. That's what you should be. That's what you should be having in governance, right? That's what you're doing. You're like, if you think about it, they call them steering committees, right? What are you actually steering? It's the trade-offs of your business that some people call them levers, some people call them other things, but in the end, that's what you're doing. You're trying to steer by readjusting. So these are all just forms of readjustment.
I think the ultimate thing I'm getting to here, Martin, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, if as a CEO or a leader of a business, you have a vision for what's to be done,
Sure.
a single objective. I think that's the right word, isn't it? Objective, you called it? Objective, key result. If you have an objective,
single focus or single purpose, whatever.
Okay, a single focus, single purpose, and you use those levers that you've suggested, and
Sure.
You're considerate of the constraints, but you still can't get what you want. I guess then it comes down to a choice of personnel. And I think, on my mind is the egos are at play in small and large organizations, and how people just do what they want, no matter the lever, no matter I mean, it's in leadership that Machiavellian sociopathic behaviors are they're quite out there, right?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why OKRs were invented in the way that they are set. I mean, how many times have we gone to an offsite, a leadership offsite, where we're going to talk about the future direction of the business? We spent 2 days creating some really nice PowerPoints using some kind of cool framework that some confident facilitator brings. We have a lovely dinner together. We kind of realize that we actually are all bad people, and we should probably give everyone a bit more of a chance in their day to day, because look at us, we can get along, in a social setting. Surely we can get along in a business one. And then on day 3, you're back in the office. The politics kick back in, the habits kick back in. Your one-on-one meetings generate silos. You're already kind of battling for resources, which includes more than people, technology, platform, etc. And it becomes competitive again by the end of the week. Nothing's changed. At least what OKR said. Well, whatever vision you're aiming for, well, create a 1-year horizon, and then within that 1-year horizon, every 12 weeks, check in and ask yourself honestly, what have we done that made a difference against those objectives, and what results have we achieved? And as a result of that, make a decision: is the objective still the right one, or what should we focus for the next 3 months? That's the deal. And make it a whole of business event. Call that a quarterly business review, where the whole business has been considered, and you then have a holistic understanding of where everything's at to know what levers to push. It's due diligence. They used to call this word back in the day due diligence, right? It's you can call it focus, you can call it feedback, you can call it whatever you want, but in the end, we have to give ourselves an ability to stop being busy and qualifying busy as adding value. So it's questionable if it does. And ask ourselves, are we going in the right direction? Are we working on the right things?
I think one of the reasons it's on my mind, Martin, and again, this isn't like there's a lot of good stuff that happens in the market and, you know, businesses like ours. But in our last podcast, we talked about coming through a time of abundance. I mean, maybe we were less kind, but we've come through this time of abundance where, you know, failure failure to achieve benefits or benefits in the time or in the cost that were set out has become an acceptable thing, or like it's more common.
Sure.
And I'm not saying it's ever acceptable. This is the point. To me, as a leader, it's never acceptable, but I understand it happens, right? And this is the theme that I'm getting to, is like, what's the consequences? How do you, like from today, hearing this, moving forward, bring in the levers, start with consequences and shift this culture of, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a spirit of abundance, but also, it's changing the culture to be one of delivery. And, it's this thing of ultimate accountability or ultimate ownership, extreme ownership. These are some of the themes that I hear. And again, when I'm seeing this stuff, I think my advice is wrong, because when I hear leaders talk to me about this, about just getting someone to do something, my immediate thing is, no matter what you do, that individual is never going to take on your vision and deliver to your OKR or your objective, whatever it is, because they're running their own race. They've got their own agenda for whatever reason, and it's maybe subconscious or conscious. And this is a thing that I'm really struggling to give good advice on. And and it feels like what you're saying to me is there has to be frameworks, and you have to do that first.
Sure.
Well, and that's what's on my mind.
I mean, I would, the spirit of cooperation is that we either all win or lose together. And if you have a bonus pool and you distribute that bonus pool by asking someone to focus on something and someone to focus on another and someone to focus on another, you've already inherently built competition into your system from the very beginning. For me, if you're a true team with a primary focus, you either win or lose together. So how are you rewarded? How are you measured? How is that shared? And one of the things I like about OKRs is that when OKRs are set, they're usually set to the entire leadership team together, and not here's your OKRs, here are my OKRs. That was never the idea. And you're not meant to have individual OKRs. We're meant to have collective OKRs, and that's to try and create this spirit of cooperation, and really, work things out. There was another point I was going to make.
OKRs are set for the entire leadership team, and collective OKRs are to endear the spirit of cooperation. Does that mean individually it's KPIs and organizationally it's OKRs? Is that the way that works?
Well, I think you can have individual KPIs if for particular health metrics that you're accountable for. But OKRs is about the greater purpose and spirit and direction of a business. I think that should be shared. Yeah, I think that's right. In the end, you always have to design how you motivate and reward with a duty of care that should be, you check on this more than once a year. And an employment survey isn't once a year isn't going to cut it either. It's all about having information to make decisions by, and that information is a combination of quantitative and qualitative assessment, but both take effort, and someone has to put those numbers together. It's about time that we try and put that effort into it. In the agile community, one of the one of the latest phases of agility is flow metrics, and that's basically having 4 numbers that basically drives the whole of business views on agility. And engineering did something similar with the DORA metrics, 4 metrics that basically determines everything. And NPS did it with customer, a single number that basically gives you a holistic view of everything. Each one of those takes effort to put together, takes effort actually to gather that information as accurately as possible. And you'd only do that if you're actually going to use the information to make a decision by. I think that's one of the things that we notice with corporate dashboards. There's a lot of corporate dashboards which are just kind of like cosmetics because no decisions made by them.
I really like that because you know, sort of answered the question I had around how you don't just have something like flow metrics but then just become redundant, you know, and that's it, isn't it? It's when you make them cosmetic as opposed to using them to you know, really inform decisions, using those metrics to inform decisions. Yeah, I got it. I just want to link back to some unless we're going to say something else on that. I want to link back to.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a fairly deep topic, and you could go into this in all sorts of angles, and I'm trying to kind of give you answers, and every time I give you an answer, there's always like an exception, and you know, I had one other thing that I was going to say, then we can close off. You know, every organization, no matter who it is, what it does, is trying to make itself unique. And if you are unique, abundance is obvious. So if I have a point of differentiation, which is unique, and I don't have competitors as a result, abundance is there. It's how blue ocean strategy became something that is taught at every MBA. But blue oceans become competitive really quickly. I remember living and having a great time in the blue ocean until I went for an RFP, and I won an RFP to an incumbent corporate who made a decision that said we have to beat them next time. So I went from a blue to a red, and I had nothing to do with it. So, you know, if we want to try and create those points of differentiation to have abundance of a blue strategy, you have to realize that someone's going to try and copy and imitate it quickly as possible, especially if they're losing. So, you know, we need to also think about how are we trying to differentiate. And for some businesses, the best way to win is to be the best in the red ocean by doing it the most efficient. Right? Efficiency is still a good thing, right? Efficiency is really helpful when your competitors are not. But if you're trying to create a unique value proposition, well, that's it. It's a different story altogether. Neither's wrong. It all depends on kind of like how you as an organization make decisions. You know, that's the reason why we have boards, is to provide that as advice of what is the right approach. What is it a unique value proposition or efficiency we should emphasize? Should we focus on customer? Should we focus on the employee? You can't do both at the same time. One leads the other. And customer centricity.
Because so many people say they do focus on customer and employee, you know, say both of those things. And the problem is also everybody's saying those things. And so therefore, immediately, you know, even if you offer, let's just say it's customer, and you've got that right and you're picking the singular focus, you look at every website that, you know, says they're a competitor, and they all say that, you know, everybody does.
Yeah, I mean, so the amount of people tell me they focus on customer, I feel is again it's a vanity metric, because when I ask how many customer interviews have you been part of in the last month, the answer is none. How many customer workshops did you get involved in the last month? The answer is none. Well, then you're not really customer focused, are you? You might
I
be
love
trying to
that.
interpret the customer. You might be doing customer analysis, but that's not customer focus. It's definitely not customer first. And that's one of the things about OKRs was that, you know, if you're saying you're going to be customer first, one of the key results, okay, you'll have attended 20 customer interviews this month. I'm too busy. Then you're too busy on the wrong things, right? That was the idea of some of the key results, is that it created that kind of tangible evidence that yes, we are customer first because you cleared your calendar to attend 20 interviews. If you say you're too busy, it's not a customer first strategy.
I love it. You're making my head swell, because I feel like I'm on 40 customer interviews a week, Martin. So hopefully we're doing something right. Hey, I'm going to ask you about a framework if someone wanted to make some decisions about going deep on OKRs. I'll ask that in a second. But
Sure.
just from, you know, I never really do this, but I was it's a piece of thinking or thought leadership I thought I had done, but it turned out it's been done. And that was, I was playing around with a concept called purple ocean strategy. And that was, you know, having a core business which red ocean that everybody's in, but also always having an eye for blue ocean, like what's the next innovation to keep you one step ahead, or service or whatever. And so I conflated those two and said purple ocean. And so I was about to run with this great piece of academic thinking that Thunder Labs has come up with this, and et cetera, et cetera. I even started posting and publishing some stuff, only when I went deeper on the research to find out that other people have been exploring that same concept, that purple ocean is the sweet spot. You know, that you're not trying to always make the market, because that's too risky, but you know, you're being the best in the red ocean whilst looking for the innovations to be blue ocean.
I mean, that's been, I think it was Deloitte that came up with the term purple people as well. When you're trying to do two things at the same time, neither is a priority. And even if you're trying to do two things at the same time, it will eventually create some form of competition within the workforce. And the best organizations that I think are purple, and the best example I remember ever was when Commonwealth Bank created ComSec as a subsidiary, and that because that was blue ocean in share trading, and when it became normalized, it became part of Commonwealth Bank again. So there's loads of strategies for organizations to be purple, but it means that some people are focusing on blue while others are focusing on red. And it, you know, I don't like the red because it was meant to, you know, be blood, war, you know, evil. Any business you're in will have a point in time where it's in a red zone because of competitors. It's not by choice. And so I like the concept, but I wasn't mad about the colors. But sure, everybody wants to sustain a cash flow and innovate at the same time. So okay, so have a clear strategy, but there might be a point in time where you focus on one more than another for too long, and it's holding you back.
And that's very interesting that you don't think you should have red and blue ocean strategy at the same time.
No, I'm not saying.
I mean, I understand it. I understand.
I'm saying just don't try and ask people to do the two at the same time. You can have divisions doing the two at the same time. You can have an innovation center. You can have hubs. You can have your skunk works. But if you're asking somebody to go to work every day and to do both in the same 8 hours, turn up in purple, that's not going to work. No, I think every organization has to find. It's about finding balance. Every organization has to find balance in whatever way suits them, but there'll be points in time where you actually have to make a pivotal move.
Well, that it sort of comes on to the thing that we originally were going to talk about, and go on to this. Feels like this podcast, by the way, we've gone much deeper into the academics of stuff as opposed to me
Yeah, I don't
capturing
want
on some of the stuff that we care about. And there's so many
to.
themes. I just, I'm just interesting. I'm in it, and I'm asking you, but I'm mindful of the tone of this and how I'm asked because I'm having to. I feel in myself. I'm having to access a different part of my brain, and I don't mean that bad, by the way. I mean that as in this is an interesting experience as an interviewer, and and you're positing thoughts back to me that I'm having to work on that slightly differently. So that's just it's a pause
Yeah,
for thought for me.
I think with
Um,
my coaching hat on, the I'm focusing more on some of the conceptual things to force your brain into the spaces that your questions are asking, rather than just giving you case studies of where I've done it, because I think that would just get the salesman kicking in again. So I've been kind of trying to, and maybe I also have to think about not coming across academic, because that's the last thing I'd want to be considered. But from where you start with the questions, I'm trying to get you to go into parts of your brain that probably aren't always awakened.
yeah,
But yeah, it's a hard balance, right? Especially with um, podcasts, to kind of, because in the end you have to go with the flow of the conversation, and the flow of the conversation was trying to access a question that you haven't really considered an answer before, and that was kind of where we started.
yeah. I think Martin, many of the people that send me a note on these podcasts are those that are trying to, demonstrate competence over prestige, but know they have to strike a balance between competently executing and prestige. They need sponsorship from, whoever they're, whether they're the CEO or whether they're, a line manager. They're still, I think that's who listens to this stuff. And so therefore, it's very relevant because, as I say, I'm genuinely in 40 odd meetings a week. I really am in 40 a week.
Yeah,
And that's not all one-on-one. Sometimes it's 10-on-1 or 3-on-1, whatever. And this theme that we're talking about here, it's all about leadership. It's leading better, leading well, and how we put tools in the hands of those that really want to knock it out of the ballpark in an authentic way. And some of the tried and tested tools, some of the things on which we were educated on through the, let's say, through the early
sure.
2000s, they're not as relevant now as they were then. In fact, I feel like there's an evolution, and we've talked about a few of those things. And one of those things that even today's topic is OKRs, because when we spoke last about, I got this wrong. I was thinking it was something slightly different for whatever reason, but it's because I'd been mistaught. I'd been subjected to a leader using OKRs on me in completely the wrong way. They'd obviously seen it and thought it was a good idea, and what they were really using it
Yeah,
as on me as a leader was KPIs. They just replaced KPI with OKR, and it's completely wrong. And that's why I walked into this with you going, I've already suspended any bias. So because I'm going, right, okay, I need to think about this differently. And suspension of bias when talking to somebody is a thing, right? It's a thing.
it is a thing. It
So
absolutely is a thing.
um, so here we go. We're approaching
Just
the end of Q1.
out of it, yeah, out of just from a serendipitous moment, I've I was reading something today because I was struggling with a similar problem to the one we just spoke about, and I found out of a bias that I've been guilty of more than I've cared to admit, but I'll probably admit it now. And it was based on a bias called accidental adversaries. And these occur where conflict or pushback arises between people because of assumed impact to role accountability or accountability from change. And I went, yeah, that's me. I have found myself in adversarial scenarios when I've been talking agile, and the pushback that I've been having, I interpreted personally, rather than thinking about the person in front of me from a role or accountability perspective. So I think we, wherever we go and whatever we do, there will be accidental adversaries in many shapes or form. And to your point, we have to, as leaders, you need to be able to rise above it and find out how did the system create this bias, rather than it's a personal conflict. And as a coach, I think I've had to put a lot of effort into that, because one of the things you have to be able to do as a coach is coach people you don't like, right? And because it's you might want to go and have drinks with them or spend Sunday afternoons with their family, but from a role of a coach, everyone's equal, everyone's valuable, and those who wish to be coached is probably the best thing that you can ever ask for. So, I found anyway this idea of accidental adversaries, I think they happen throughout organizations, and we sometimes don't put a name to it. So there you go.
I feel like I want more detail on adversarial bias, Martin. You have to send me the article, and well done for having it on hand, because I was also reading something this morning, but I don't have it to hand. So again, shows your preparation over mine. So, okay, this is where I wanted to get to. Me and organizations like mine, executives that I'm dealing with, we're approaching the end of Q1, so they're 1 quarter into the new year or new financial year, and unless you're a bank, some banks. Let's say they want to start Q2 and shape up OKRs. Let's say they want to, they're not getting what they want out of the year, and things are changing so fast in the market. I mean, it's very fluid at the moment, I think. So, what would the steps be moving into Q2 if someone goes, "I've had enough," and or I see an opportunity to optimize. Maybe it's not as skeptical as I see it sometimes.
Sure.
What they do, and let's say they're engaging with someone like you. Right? It doesn't have to be you, but someone like you. What should they look for from advisors, and then what are the logical steps to knock it out of the ballpark for the remaining of the year? Like, what do they do?
Okay. Yeah. So I think the first thing is you have to ask: is this something that can be self-realized, or is this something that has to be awareness to? So, if you have a group that are already kind of figuring this out for themselves, you can run a macro retrospective, and in a macro retrospective, you can kind of ask yourself, why is this happening, and how are we going to resolve it? And we can self-determine our way through this. The other way would be that where you actually think there's an unconsciousness to this. There's there's a difference between being consciously incompetent and unconsciously incompetent. So, I'm working with an organization, and I've decided that I'm going to focus the opening of my presentation on Unilever, and I'm going to create a comparison to Unilever and ask if this is something that is being done elsewhere. Should we also be reacting in a similar manner? And so, for me, you have to figure out, is this something which is a macro force that people haven't accepted, or is this something which we're already talking about, but we really haven't took the time to put words to it or sentences or agree? So you can. So is it self-reflection that's going to get you through the answer, or is it comparison and contrast with others? I mean, if it was the start of the year, I would have asked something similar around scenario planning and a review of the previous year. But in the end, you have to figure out which one is it. Can we, I always ask, I mean, I think it's maybe overly simple, but is the approach you wish to take an outside in or an inside out? I can give you tools for either, give you benefits for either, give you negatives for either, but in the end you have to make one. And can we not do a bit of both? No, you can't, because then you don't put you're just trying to not put an emphasis in the right place. Yeah, and someone says, "Oh,
I'm not sure. I mean, I get that question, by the way. Is this an inside-out approach, or is it an outside-in approach? You know, and you have to choose one of those. But the bit before that you were talking about, is this something that can be self-realized, or does it need a review? Does that mean like you can do inside out if you're realizing it anyway? What does that mean?
So you, and I'm very specific to quarter 2, right? So imagine I worked with one organization, and at Q2, the leadership said this has been the worst quarter ever. The delivery teams were patting themselves on the back saying, this is amazing, we did an amazing job. And I asked, okay, you have leadership and your teams polarly opposite. Is this something that you think they can self-realize together, or is someone going to have to tell them? There was another organization who said the market's changed. I said, okay, great. How? And where did you get that information from? And the answer was, it's how we feel. I said, okay, well, can you make your feelings evidence? Do you have to go and ask your customer, or do you have to go and ask your staff? It's easier to ask your staff. It's faster. Asking your customer the problem when you ask customers, sometimes the ones that you hear most of are the ones who aren't happy, and the ones who are happy probably aren't as interested in, especially with surveys. You'll always get a skew to customer surveys of people who have a problem with you because they think this is a way to get resolved, rather than people are really happy and just take your quality for granted. So there's a whole industry of built around some of these things with design thinking. So in the end, you're going to have to, if there's a disparity at the end of Q2, what is the evidence that you're going to use to talk to it? Because in the end, you have to triangulate. I can't just look at you, Chris, and say Q1 was bad and Q2 needs to be better. I have to say Q1 is bad because of these data points, 1, 2, 3. Do you agree with those data points? You can say, well, you're only picking the exceptions. What about all the great things we did? And one of the biggest problems we've had in organizations is they've shifted their strategy due to an exception. So outliers, an outlier-based strategy is not necessarily a good one. It's only if the outlier is becoming a trend, right? And if you've 99 people that are happy with you and you've one that's complaining, you put more effort into one that's complaining than the other 99. What would the impact be to your cash flow if some of the happy aren't happy so much? So you kind of have to think about it in that manner in order to determine what's the right approach moving forward. And then, do we have to baseline and get a handle on how things are changing, or do we already have a baseline that we can create a target against? And so the market's changing, but we don't have a baseline. We just have a feeling. Well, feelings don't turn always into the best strategies. Emotions are biased, and reactions are emotional. So how long has it been going for? If it's only been going for a couple of weeks, are we emotionally reacting to something? Are we taught strategically? Again, that's where sometimes an outside-in approach is better than an inside-out. For me, I think
I'm going to pause you there. A couple of things, a couple of reasons, because we've only got 3 minutes left, and I think we're now getting to the meat of it, which means well done. It's like a cliffhanger. I feel like we're in, an episode of Lost, or in what's that, Stranger Things, or something equally enthralling that I got addicted to when it first came out. Because we're just getting into this now. So I heard number 1, people need to decide if it's an inside out or an outside in approach. And then and secondly, then they need to start forming, and they need to form a view based on data, not just on feelings, about what their performance has been. And that's where we've got into. So like, as you're going, I'm replaying that right, I hope. Is that what I'm hearing?
You're right. Yeah.
And then, so just as we move into sort of pausing for next time, the next few things that you would say that they would do.
Is it, with the data, is it an outlier? Is it a trend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's analysis of the data.
That's right. And is it too soon to act, or do we need to make a baseline? And that's now not about data, that's about coherence. And sometimes next steps is to put the effort to create the baseline, not just to react with primary information.
Okay. What else on that? Like, you've got the inside out.
So don't expect to get the next decision right. So sometimes it's about hedging your bets. Sometimes it's about just giving it a shot. And don't expect perfection. And definitely don't expect promises. If you've got that level of uncertainty, you can't hold people to account to a commitment, to a direction, yes, to continuously validating, sure, but you can't just say, promise me you're going to make me $1 million. The one thing I've seen happen is that when the market shifts and let's say you're aiming to make a $4 million goal, and in month 2 you've only made 0.6, and someone says, okay, so your next 2 months are going to be 1.2 each, because you have to make that up. Maybe it was the wrong goal at the start, and putting that pressure could actually create a worse result, because now people are stressed to the market shift, because they're being asked to not only to overachieve, not just achieve the target. Under prevailing circumstances that meant the target wasn't achieved. That could turn into anxiety. So be very careful the emotions that you place on people.
Definitely an interesting reflection on me, for me, Martin, and some of the things that we're doing in this business. I'm really committed to leading well, and there's a litany of mistakes throughout this, and I really like this. Don't expect perfection. Don't expect people to commit when they can't see how it's going to be done, and I've made that error. I actually thought I was in some of these things making very conservative predictions of what we could do, and yet the commitment is hard to extract. But it means that what I can see through experience can be done. It doesn't necessarily mean my leadership team is it so. And
sure.
I think it's a really interesting reflection. Now, I am going to pause here for our next time, and it feels like we've got lots more to cover on these particular topics, but man, there's just so much in this. I'm going to save and press pause now, and I'm going to replay this with my marketing team and get it published as soon as we can. Martin, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been fun again.